So we want to start with the standard unit, and that's just going to be a part of the body that we measure other parts against. So a standard unit has to be a good size, which means not too small and not too large. Okay? I could use like a single knuckle bone as a standard unit, and I'd be able to measure really accurately, but it's so small that it'd be really hard to measure things. It'd take forever. It'd involve a lot of calculation. I could use a leg as a standard unit, but it's so long that it's hard to measure things against it. It's like, I don't know, trying to measure a small distance with a yardstick that doesn't have any marks on it. All right? So what we typically use for bodies is the head. The head's a really good standard unit for measuring bodies out and making them proportional. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of make a mark here. This is going to be my bottom mark. I'm going to make a body that's 8 heads tall. All right? Typically, you'll be told to make bodies that are 6 to 8 heads tall, which is pretty good advice. 8 heads I like because it divides up real easy. Okay? So that's why we're using 8. So this is a little bit stretched out. This is maybe a little taller than most people are going to be. But it really measures easily. So that's pretty much my number one reason. So I'm going to make a line at the bottom of my figure and a line for where the top's going to be. And I'm going to space them out. I want to use my paper. Okay? I want to make this figure fill my paper. A lot of us tend to draw real small. And I have some theories on why that is, but why is not really important. We should get away from it. Okay? This is the main thing I'm going to put on the paper, so it should take up most of the space. All right? So you can leave a little room on top and bottom, but it should take up most of your space. And now I'm going to divide this span from where the feet are going to be to where the top of the head's going to be into 8 equal parts. Now, I find in drawing that division is a little bit easier than addition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide. Oops, I have a broken pencil. I'm going to divide that space in half. And then I'm going to divide each half in half. And each half in half again. See if I have another pencil in here that'll work. Everybody's being so quiet, and then the pencil breaks. So I'm going to divide each of those in half again. Get a clear line there. I'm going to divide each of those in half again. One of the things that you can do when you're drawing, if you're curious how accurate you are, you can line up your pencil with the top and then pinch it at the bottom of whatever you're measuring, and you can check how accurate you are. And you can make adjustments as needed. Once you start chasing that, that's a deep rabbit hole to go down. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty accurate here. I'm happy with it. Okay. So I'm going to start with the head. I'm going to start up at the top. So if I draw a sort of circle shape, it goes about 2/3 of the way down. And then kind of a jawline. That gives me a pretty good head. You can also just kind of draw an oval shape. We don't need a ton of detail here. bummer. Any of these pencils are garbage. Alright, we'll have to use some fine. Alright, so we're going to start with the basic kind of skeletal structure and build it up from there. So this will be where the skull is. And I'm going to make a mark about halfway down to the second head. That's going to be where my clavicle is. I'm going to mark these for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? So next we're going to try to define this sort of rib cage shape. So the rib cage is going to go about down to the bottom of the third head. So it's going to be about right here. It's going to come up. This is the clavicle area, about halfway between 1 and 2. So the rib cage is going to be like a little bit narrower at the top than the bottom. The sternum's going to come up almost to 0.2 right here. You have that? The next thing we're going to draw is this hip bone structure. So the hips are going to, points of the hips are going to be probably about halfway between 3 and 4. These are like the tips of the wings at the top. And they're going to be about the width of the rib cage. Let's talk about the width of the rib cage. The rib cage probably wants to be about 2 head widths. So don't make it too wide. Okay. And then we'll define this sort of hip structure. The hips are going to come out here, and then they're going to taper in a little bit. So if we want to really simplify them, they're kind of shaped like this. In reality, they're like a little more butterfly shaped. We can keep them real simple. Either way. Alright, next we're going to place the knees. The knees are going to be just slightly above our number 6 here. I'm going to draw little circles for my joints today so that we can be mindful of where the body bends. Start avoiding the spaghetti arms. I'm going to draw some feet. Oops. I'm going to draw this foot facing forward. And this one sideways. So the feet will be at 0.8, which is going to be where the floor is. I'm just going to connect them with simple line structures. The top of the femur is going to attach to the side of the hip. Okay. Maybe need to raise this up a little bit. Worry about that later. So up here, we're going to have scapula that come out a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about male and female figures. as we go. For a male figure, if we have like kind of idealized proportions, we want like kind of a V shape here. So what that comes from is you've got these latissimus dorsi back here that are kind of coming out a little bit from the rib cage. And we've got scapula, which are kind of triangle shapes. Those are your shoulder bones. Not shoulder bones, like behind you. There's going to be a joint right here where the shoulder attaches. And then that elbow is going to be right about the bottom of the rib cage, maybe a little lower. And then the wrist is going to be slightly below. I need to bring that up a little bit. Let's bring that up a little bit. Wrist will be slightly below the bottom of the hip here, 0.4. You can kind of connect those. You can connect those. On this side, I'm going to extend this arm out a little bit. So if the arm would fall, or if the elbow would fall about here, I'm going to circumscribe an arc. I can also use my pencil and measure here and here. An elbow, connect it. So we can kind of use this method of circumscribing arcs or kind of measuring to reposition the body. Just thinking about where those joints are able to swing to. The only time this becomes a problem is when the body starts moving towards the viewer, and then you need to foreshorten. But the thing to remember there is that when the body or when the limbs move towards the viewer, they're going to become shorter. Okay, so they're going to shorten, and you kind of can shorten them according to your intuition. So the hand is about a head length or a head height from wrist to fingertips. It's a little shorter than that, but it's pretty close. Just keep everything real simple for now. So in my sketching phase, I just want to keep everything real simple. Okay? I'm just trying to find that shape. I'm actually going to go in and line this. I'm just going to build it up from here. So when we start adding some flesh to this, let's start from the top. The neck's not real long. There's not a lot happening there most of the time. So there's a little bit of separation between the neck and the shoulder level, but you don't want to extend it too much. The body's going to come in here a little bit. It's going to come out at the hips. So you're basically going to have kind of a circle of flesh around this. And the limbs are basically going to be like really elongated ovals. So they're basically cylinders, and they might get a little thicker in the middle or towards the elbow, but they're pretty much going to be parallel lines. So you can kind of sketch and sculpt, start with like some parallel lines connecting those joints, and add a little bit of mass if you think that you need it. And we can kind of feel out where that body's supposed to be. One of the things that I was noticing in the first class today was some of the hips were getting real wide. So the top of this hip is going to be about the width of the rib cage here, and that's going to be about 2 head widths wide. So you don't want to get those too wide. And then notice that the hips taper in before the femur attaches to the hips. So make sure you have that taper. We don't want to have this giant thigh gap. We don't want our people to be too wide. And then we can just kind of add mass to this. So don't get like too balloony with this. Don't be like, whoa, whoa. You don't want that. I'd say probably keep it in tight to start and then maybe build it up. So after we have this kind of sketched out, and again, all of this we want to keep real light. I'm drawing a lot darker than I need to because I'm trying to make it so you can see it on a projector, but you don't need to get very dark with this at all, just enough for you to see what's going on. After this, we're going to kind of go in and try to find those important contours and maybe add those to the body. I'm going to try to keep this real simple today. Not too bad. Pull that down a little bit. Okay. Then after I get my contours in there, and start thinking about form. So I've got kind of the outlines of my shapes here. I can start thinking about the form. I can think about light source, sort of how that light's going to be hitting the form, and what areas are going to be kind of lighter, and what areas I might need some shadow. So ultimately, by following this sort of procedure of defining the shapes, defining the important edges, and then defining kind of the shadows, the light and shadows, we're really trying to set ourselves up for painting in the future, because these are going to be important sort of concepts to have some understanding of if we're going to paint anything that's not totally flat. All right. Even just a little bit of tone, we can start to really define that form. So if we're doing a female form, the bone structure is pretty similar. The main difference is going to be the hips. So if we've got a rib cage here, I'm going to try to draw it as similar as I can, as close as I can to the original. There's like, I guess the way this works is there's a little bit less of a hip taper. So they're a little bit wider at the bottom. And that's going to make the femurs stick out a little bit more here. So sort of our net result of that is we're going to have a little bit more curve to the body. Ah. We're going to have a little bit of a curve in like that. All right. Need a little more arm. Beef him out a little bit. So that's basically the basic idea. Best I can do it anyway. So, yeah. The goal here is that we kind of understand forms and that we're able to put together more three-dimensional looking figures. We're able to guide this for when we're drawing, or use this as a guide for when we're drawing from observation, but also use it when we're just pulling from our imagination to draw things as well.